Everybody clap one time if you can hear me. Clap 2 times if you can hear me. Clap 3 times if you can hear me. All right, thank you. So, I'm excited to introduce one of our featured speakers. There are honestly many amazing national speakers who are here today. Who'll be joining in 3 different sections of conversation up on stage. We'll definitely have time for Q&A and for a discussion as well. There are little half sheets that we've been passing out, so if you want to ask a question, make sure you grab one of those from Heather there. She's got the basket up. And we'll be collecting those, so when you finish your question, just put your hand up with the paper and we'll come and grab it from you. Okay? All right, so I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, someone who's been a really fearless advocate and leader, someone who has not shied away from speaking her mind and from taking the kind of risks that we need to be able to really change what's politically possible. Without further ado, please put your hands together for Linda Sarsour.
My first time in New Hampshire.
Awesome.
And I received a wonderful welcome, and just really want to thank Kathy and Nesri and all the organizations here in New Hampshire for all the work that you do. I was telling folks before, I have been to usual churches across the country. I love you. You really have taught me a lot about what Christianity really is. You taught me about the socialist, organizer and activist that Jesus was. I'm someone who's very core and central to the faith that I follow. And I just want to say thank you for also taking risks and standing up for, Black lives and for immigrant communities and for LGBTQ people and for refugees and for Muslims. And I want you to know that we see you, and we know that sometimes it's not easy to do that, but you are on the right side of history, and I just wanted to say thank you. About me, and I'm sure many of you know me. I'm in this place in my life, and I haven't lived that long on this earth, but it seems like a pretty long time. I'm in this place in my life where I just don't care anymore. I don't care what I'm not afraid. I don't walk into places and think about how I'm going to say things or how or what words to use because I'm worried about somebody being uncomfortable. We're living under fascism. That already says enough for me, and if you're uncomfortable with something that I'm going to say, but you're not uncomfortable with living in a fascist nation in 2019, I don't know what to tell you. And one of the things about organizing, and one of the questions that was asked to us earlier is what can we do better? And I do believe that we can do better, and I'm talking about progressives can do better, and the political left can do better, and people who believe in justice and equality for all can do better. And what I mean by that is that we're not enough. That's it. We just gotta realize and own that we are not enough. And the question is, how do you build base? And how do you bring more people to the cause? You gotta meet people where they're at. And one of the things about the progressive left that I've criticized for a very long time is that we're very intellectual people. And we also have a lot of conviction. You gotta believe these 4 things that we believe, or you're just not part of the team. This is not how it works. This is not how you bring people along. And as an organizer, and I tell people all the time, I'm not an activist. And I say activists are important people. I'm not an activist. I'm an organizer. And my job as an organizer is to organize other people. And in order to organize other people, I have to have conversations with them. I also got to know what hurts them. I got to know what their pain is. I got to know what are the issues that impact them. What do they want? What is their imagination? What is the aspirations that they have? They may not be mine, but they belong to them. And in order for me to bring them along, I got to know where they're going. To see if there's a place that we can converge and go along together. For example, in the state of New Hampshire, I was talking to a wonderful young man here in this room who's a Bernie supporter like I am, who talking about the opioid crisis. That's an issue that crosses all communities, right? There may be a staunch Republican who may have an issue with a child who may be on opioids. Guess what? He's a father, I'm a mother, we can have this conversation. I'm going to stand with you on an issue like that. So how do we have these conversations? How do we see the humanity in one another? And one of the things that I've experienced is people not being able to see the humanity in someone like me or people who look like me or the communities that I come from. And that's really just the fundamental bottom line of where we are and the state of affairs in our country. The other thing about the progressive left that we got to do better is that Medicare for all is not radical, people. I hope you don't think that you're radical for believing that everybody deserves health care. Like, it's not radical. Really, like, sometimes I'm sitting in the room, I'm like, really, folks? Like, and that's why we are not able to bring more people along, because we have set up these issues as these political left issues. The progressives believe this, and this is a progressive issue. It's not progressive to believe that everybody deserves health care, that people shouldn't have to put up GoFundMes to fund their medical care. It's not radical. It's not left. It's not right. It's not any political ideology. It is a human right to have health care. It's not left or right to believe that Black Lives Matter. It's not a progressive issue. Black Lives Matter should to everybody. That we should live in a country that values the sanctity of all life, and in particular Black life, because when we value the sanctity of Black life, then we value the sanctity of all life. It's not people in Ohio, I don't talk to people about progressive issues. I talk to people about things that touch all of us. And when I say that, people say, oh, every child should have quality education regardless of the zip code that they live in. Guess what? That's not radical. It's really not. It's not progressive. So I say these things to say, let's stop putting labels on one another. I'm not a progressive. I'm an American. I'm a mom. I'm an organizer. I'm a person that believes that all of us in this room should be able to walk out into the streets of our community safely. I also believe that we should live in a country where we don't just survive, that we get to thrive in our country. So when you say $15 wage, it really should be $35. That's just It's really not radical. And so what we do is we actually pigeonhole ourselves. And we actually make our circles so small that others can't see themselves reflected in what we're saying, because we're too busy worrying about what the labels are. I don't care who you are, what faith you follow, whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God. If you believe that I should live in this country with dignity and respect, you're my people. That's really the bottom line. So I always say this, and we have these issues amongst the progressive left as well. And I say to people all the time, guess what? In this room, I will guarantee you, there may be an issue or two or three where there's probably about 100 opinions on that issue. Because I'm not trying to be part of a united movement. That's not, unity is not uniformity. How is it possible that I'm born and raised in Brooklyn? I'm a daughter of Palestinian immigrants. I'm Muslim. I'm a mom. I went to public school. I've had way different experiences than many people in this room. How do you expect me and you to agree on that? I don't even agree with my father and everything. So this idea that you and I can't be in the movement together because you don't agree with me on one issue, this is why we're not as far along as the right is, because they figured out how to have disagreements and still agree and focus on the things that they do agree on. So what I hope happens today, and as we move with this tour and the work that you continue to do here, is that you don't make an elite club, that you have this exclusive club, that people got to check every box that you have on your social contract. Of course, there's basic principles and values that we want people to adhere to, but sometimes those people have to come into our spaces so they can hear our values. Because people don't even know what you stand for if they can't be in space with you. So what I say to all of you, that you can count on me. I don't know where it comes from, but because we're in a church, I will say this. God is the best of protectors for me. And when God wants me, He's going to take me. So I'm not afraid. And I'm going to leave you with this quote that I recently came across by an abolitionist, Harriet Beecher Stowe, which I know many of you know and have heard of. And it really spoke to me. And it's really like so relevant to this particular moment that we're in as we're trying to figure out who we are as a country, but also how we push forward on these issues. And this is what Harriet Beecher Stowe said. She said, when you get into a tight place and everything goes against you, till it seems as though you could not hang on a minute longer, never give up then. For that is just the place and time that the tide will turn. And so what I will say to you today in this political climate that we're in, this political election that we're in, guess what's happening? The tide is turning. You just gotta hang on a little longer, work a little harder, knock on a couple of more doors, gotta stay up an hour later. Whatever you gotta do, just gotta hold on for us, because there's so much at stake in this election, particularly for the most marginalized people. And I will tell you that my community, Black people, undocumented people, LGBTQIA people, Jewish people, all kinds of people who are feeling so hurt and pained and broken in this moment are counting on you. And so I hope that we come back here in November of 2020, where we together will defeat fascism in these United States of America. Thank you.
Speaking after Linda Sarsour is both the most terrifying and the biggest honor I could possibly imagine, because she is fierce, she is honest, and she returns hate with love constantly. And that is the kind of courage we need in this country. She is a profound biggest hero, so thank you for coming. So we're going to begin, I'm going to introduce the set of conversations we're having about how to build a new social contract in our country. And I just want to start with sharing a quick story about a conversation I had last night. Last night I stayed with Jennifer, who's back there, here, an old friend who's born and bred in the state of New Hampshire. And she was telling me how she got really lucky that she was able to get one of the last houses she could really kind of afford, her and her great guy back there in the neighborhood. And then she said, "Did you see the building next door, the house next door?" And I said, she pointed. And there was this 4,000-foot monstrosity sitting empty since 2011 in a state which you know people can barely afford their housing and people are struggling to find housing because it's owned by a wealthy family that does not live in the Grand State and can wait all the years they want until they get the price they want. And so I share that because you don't have to look very far to answer the question, why do we need a new social contract? Sometimes you just need to look next door. Now some of you might be thinking, well, do we need an entirely new social contract to fix the housing problem? And we don't, because we don't actually have a housing problem. We have more than 3 times as many empty homes as homeless people.
That's right.
We have a political problem. When you have a housing problem, you build affordable housing and you solve it. We don't have a housing problem. We have a political problem. And when you have a problem with an issue, you work on an issue. When you have a problem with housing, education, healthcare, immigration, criminal justice, climate, race, you name it, you no longer have a problem with an issue. You don't work on an issue. You work on a system.
That's right.
And that is what we are here to do, because Linda is right. The tide is about to turn, and how it turns depends on organizers like you in this room. So, let's be clear, what we don't have is an economic problem either. We're an extremely wealthy country. People get up and say there's problems with the economy. Not really. We have more than enough wealth. When you have problems with the economy, you grow the economy, produce goods that our people need. What we have is a political problem there, and fundamentally, it is a problem of power. It is a problem of power. And the solution lies in the very name of the organization that has brought you here together, rights and democracy. And that's what we need a new social contract for. And for those of you who might be wondering at this moment, what the hell is a social contract anyway? Wasn't anybody going to tell me? It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the way we all agree to organize ourselves, for our mutual agreed upon rights and responsibilities with each other, with our institutions, with our government, because we are committed to being flawed as it is right now, a democracy. And a democracy requires the consent of the people. And so the social contract is something we have to negotiate amongst ourselves. And the one we have is unraveled. It's in tatters. And the next one is coming. There is no question that we're going to have a new social contract. The question is what kind? And that's what we're here to discuss. So I'll end my introduction with a confession. When we launched, and by the way, Alessandra, thank you very much, but I'm not leading any movement or new social contract. It is we are supporting organizers all over the country. It's people like you who are leading a movement for a new social contract. It's organizers talking to people. So while it's very, very flattering, the truth is we are just here to support what you all are doing and try to make the whole greater than the sum of its parts. Because even though our first conversation with our staff was like, are we crazy? Who do we think we are? Really? That we could be thinking that we could contribute to a conversation like this. But when we did a survey of all the community-driven solutions referred to earlier, many of which we've been supporting for the last 15 years, we saw that the answers were really there. And our job is to turn that into something bigger, to scale it up, and to start these conversations. We begin by just saying it, by talking about it, by talking to each other, and move on to just doing it, as you already are at the local level, because there is no national without local. And we end by doing it together. So what you will hear tonight, I wrote on my little post on Facebook that it is not by design, but it is no accident that the first panel is constituted by a Palestinian American, a Black American, a white American, and a Latina.
That's right.
Because we can only win how?
Together.
I didn't hear you.
That's right.
Together.
My people speak loudly, so I need it louder.
Together.
Juntos.
Juntos, sí.
Together, right. And we will be talking with the first group about the large idea of a new social contract and get all these organizers' thoughts on how we can move that forward, because they're brilliant and fierce, each and every one. We will then be talking to some of the foremost labor experts in the country, and I'll introduce them when it's their turn. And then we'll be talking to some of your local leaders about how you're all making it happen right here. So I start by reintroducing Linda Sarsour. She wrote to many of us, I'm sure. Jennifer Epps Addison. Important national networks, the Center for Popular Democracy. And my dear friend and a visionary, the head of RAD, James. Y'all are mostly going to talk to each other, and I'm just going to start you off. And we're going to start with the theme we just touched on, is simple question. Although I don't think this crowd needs to be convinced, but we all need to learn how to talk about it. Why do we need a new social contract? And what do you think people are saying?
Thanks so much, Kathy, and thanks so much, all of you, for coming out here today. It's just an honor to be up here with some of my mentors and heroes in this movement, and tackling these questions. I think a lot about this. I've now been organizing for about 20 years, and you know, really appreciate Linda introducing herself not as an activist but an organizer. And as you know, for me, being a dad is really what makes me tick these days, is thinking about the future that we'll be giving to our next generations, and hopefully the generations that will come after them. And so, you know, think about, you know, a new social contract. You know, for us, really, it is comes down to, you know, why we started Rights and Democracy as a multi-issue organization that was about building power, and really thinking about. In many ways, a new social contract is a vision for a real democracy. One, you know, where people are actually making the decisions for their communities and their families in their country, in this planet, so that it is about what's in the best interest of people in the planet, and reorienting how the decisions are made right now, which why we're in such a mess is because that's not why the decisions have been making. So our current contract, while there's some decent parts about it, ultimately it's a very good system for a billionaire class and for a handful of people, relatively speaking, to be able to treat the world like a playground, and we need to totally reorient it. That's why I'm really attracted to the notion of having a new social contract that puts people on the planet first.
So how do we do that? I look to both of you to give us some thoughts. I assume you agree we have to reorient.
The how? I want the why. How about
Go
this?
ahead, tell us the why.
The how is so complicated. So first of all, hello everyone, I'm Jennifer Epsadison. It is quite an honor to be here now. 2 weeks in a row, I got to spend time with Rights and Democracy last week during the Democratic Convention, and got to see firsthand some of the insanity that is the New Hampshire primary. So thank you. I care a lot about what happens in this state because my brother and my beautiful sister and nephew moved here not too long ago, a few years ago, and so when I hear about the challenges folks are having, whether it is being ravaged by the opioid crisis or the fears that people have about the beautiful environment that for generations people have enjoyed, the corporate interests that are running roughshod over the state, the sticker shock of rent and housing, it matters a lot to me because it's about my family. But the reality is that the challenges you're facing here in New Hampshire are the challenges we're facing all over the country, despite what the corporate news media would have you think. Your experiences and struggles are similar to the ones that I had growing up in Wisconsin, the ones that I now face living in Los Angeles. They are not so far apart. I worry about the schools my kids go to, and whether or not they're going to prepare them to lead a dignified life in this country. I worry about their access to health care. I've faced many healthcare crises over the last couple of years, first with my husband being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and then most recently, just 2 months ago, my father having a major heart incident and being in the ICU for 8 weeks. I know what it's like to worry about, will I be able to cover this prescription? Should I go to the doctor or wait it out a little bit longer because I can't afford my copay? These are the things that you're struggling with here, but they're happening all over the country, and they shouldn't be. We live in the wealthiest country in the nation. And I'll just say this one thing, there are a lot of people who like to exploit us along race and class lines. They like to tell us we're so dissimilar. They like to point fingers and say, the person who's picking your food or taking care of your child or cleaning up at that hospital, that's the reason you don't have the things that you and your community need. For a long time in this country, white supremacy has definitely acted like a noose around the neck of people of color. But it is a knife in the back of struggling white people all over this country who think that they're aligning themselves with people who could have zero interest in actually helping them attain the quality of life we all deserve. And so that's why I'm excited about a new social contract. It's not just about transforming the economy, but it is about stomping out white supremacy at its core so that all of us have dignity and freedom in this country.
So raise although there were some very good parts of our last social contract, racial divisions were built deeply into, right? We know there were separate housing programs that certain kinds of workers, mostly black and brown, were excluded from protection, and mostly programs weren't universal, right? They were fragmented. They weren't for everyone. How important, or in what way, do we need to engage with the question of race to truly effectively create a different kind of social contract?
I just wish people would listened to me actually. I feel like I got the plan. We're recording it. We're gonna write it out. I think we're listening. Yeah, I think the how is
really rooted in the confidence that we're going to have about talking about a new social contract, about believing that we are actually, in fact, the mainstream. I think we oftentimes feel like we are trying to convince somebody else, but really we haven't convinced ourselves of the things that we actually deserve. And I think, as I said earlier, these conversations are so important to have these individual conversations within your community. I'm not from New Hampshire. I can't knock on your neighbor's door. I can't talk to your sister or your brother-in-law or the man that owns the local coffee shop on the strip. That's for you. And what happens oftentimes with us is, as we think about how to move a campaign or how to win something or how to get people to talk about something, we always say, hey, nobody's gonna miss me. What am I gonna do? I'm just one person. I may not even be affiliated with the organization. I go to church like 6 times a year. Who am I? And I always say to people, you're that one person that can knock on those 10 extra doors that we needed. You are that person that can talk to 4 more people that we needed to talk to in order to win a local policy or to win a local campaign. That people underestimate their individual power. And the other thing that is often, when we think about even this kind of idea of all, I say to people all the time, solidarity is great. You know, when I drove up to the church, I saw Black Lives Matter. I was like, I'm definitely in the right place. This is it. I said, please stop right here. And I think that's important, the visible kind of solidarity that people show. But I always tell people that the most important kind of solidarity is actually the one that the people you're standing in solidarity with don't see. So when you're working on a policy campaign or someone's trying to convince you of something, you say, hold on a second, how does this impact immigrants? Because I really am interested in hearing about that, right? This idea that you can stand up for somebody not in their presence. And also when we have these conversations about how to pay for things, I get really offended, and I hope you two are offended. When people start nickeling and diming our healthcare, right? And I always tell people all the time, when anybody, particularly, forget their opposition, I'm talking people from the political party that's supposed to represent our values. When someone tells us, how are you going to pay for healthcare, is a question that I don't want to ever answer. I don't even want to tell you how many, because you know why? You better figure out how you're going to pay for healthcare the same way you figure out how to put trillions of dollars into unjust wars. And never once have I heard anybody ask us how we're going to pay for that. So for me, it's about, we can say, we can build a document, we can do the reports, which are important for information. The question is, what kind of confidence in your heart that you can walk with saying, here are the things we all deserve, black, white, straight, Muslim, refugee, working class, but everybody can have the same conversation with the type of confidence that our opposition has. Our opposition is confident. They're so, when I hear them speak, when I close my eyes and I hear them speak, I'm like, wow. I can see why they can move people really quickly. The question is, are we always convinced of the things that we're fighting for? And I think that in order for us to push a new social contract, we got to actually believe in the things that we're saying.
So James, you're here in Vermont and New Hampshire. How do you persuade people that we deserve these high bar solutions that they themselves have been, designing and pushing, and movements have been talking about for decades? I mean, I couldn't agree more with what Linda's saying. We have to believe it ourselves first. We're not radical, we are reasonable. We are.
It's a great question. I mean, this fundamentally is about, for us, raising expectations of what's possible for our communities. So that's, we live in a particularly intense, terrifying, sometimes very exciting historical moment. But for many of us, it's overwhelming to think about all the things that we have to do. And I think it is, it's about remembering that, this is an incredibly wealthy country, and we have everything that we need. The point you made about housing is exactly the right point, that we don't have a problem of figuring out how to build enough houses. We just have, it's a political question. It's a question of who is the system for, and what are the priorities. And so, grounding it, and a lot of the great rhetoric about what this country was founded on, around, what we like to think about our states. Being from Vermont, Vermont has such a great reputation, and we are only actually realizing a fraction of our potential, of what it would actually mean to be, a progressive place, or even, the place that people like to think about. So the good thing about, it's daunting if we think about all of the issues that we have to win. But we're never going to be able to win issue by issue, and this is why I'm so excited about the new social contract, because it's a framework of how we can just reorient the priorities. And we've seen it happen. You know, you look back the last New Deal, you know, it was a period where hundreds of pieces of legislation bills were passed in just a couple of years. Great Society in the 60s. And you know, in the dark side, what we've been up against in less than 2 years since this administration got up, you can't name all the ways that they've been pushing an agenda against our rights and democracy, about ways to pit us against each other. And so, you know, that has happened because of a political commitment and a political movement. And so we can do and we have to do it. This is what, you know, I think, you know, especially I think putting in the ecological question, what, you know, the future of this planet, we have to figure out a way to get this right in short order to have a new social contract.
Can I give an example? Sorry, go ahead.
So I want to offer 3 shifts in mindset that go along with this concept of building a new social contract. So the first shift in mindset for me is really, you know, we all, I think most of the people in this room feel warm and fuzzy when we hear the word universalist and the great universalist programs of our, you know, past generations, the New Deal, Social Security, Medicare, right? Many of us are fighting tooth and nail to protect them and save them. When we think about universalism, though, I think we want to shift our mindset to go to targeted universalism. The idea that actually if today we provided health care to everyone in this country, point blank, we still actually will do little to close the disparities in health care and health outcomes until we actually begin to understand that communities who have been denied access to health care, have been denied health care for generations, have generational traumas that we need to account for and create specific and targeted programs for to create equity, right? So the second shift is from equality, something that I know many people in this room probably spent a lot of time fighting for, particularly in the 60s and 70s, towards the concept of equity, right? The idea is that we're not actually all the same. Our lived experiences are not actually completely the same. The way a particular system might impact me has a lot to do with my background, with my citizenship status, with my ability to communicate in English, with my economic power, right? And so equity means designing specific programs that help to raise the bar of those and bring those who have been excluded and pushed to the margins into the center. And then the last concept that I think is required for us to go there, and I think we have to go there in order to get to this new vision for our country, is reparations. How do we repair the harm? The extraction that has happened from communities, how do we repair that so that we can begin to actually truly move forward? And I'll give you an example, and it's not going to be the one you're thinking of, because right now you're all thinking slavery, but I'm going to give you a different one. Tens of thousands, even millions of families have been impacted by opioids, which were never safe, which were pushed onto our communities in insane amounts and numbers. Then claim the criminalization after the addiction, where your choices were jail or death, right? Because if you had an addiction and you had an overdose, your friends would not take you to the hospital or call the ambulance for you because they were scared to go to jail. People have made billions and billions of dollars. Right? So as we think about the opioid crisis, it's not just enough to say, okay, from now on, this is a public health issue. We're going to make sure that people can go to the doctor. Maybe we'll have safe consumption sites. We actually have to say the companies that benefited from the pushing of this drug, that made these billions of dollars, owe reparations to our communities to make them whole, to help heal them, and to provide for the cost of ongoing care as we try to reduce the epidemic that is the opioid crisis. That is reparations, and we have to put that as part of our framework if we want to actually transition to a better economy.
I'm going to give an example also, you know, something that is really important to me about being an organizer is being a well-informed organizer. Because I studied actually to be a high school English teacher, and I see education as very core to the work that we do. And I just had a debate recently with someone who was like really anti-Medicare for all. And, you know, it was actually one of the reasons why they didn't want to support Bernie Sanders. That was literally the whole conversation. So I was like, this is really weird. Like I want to know more. Like, it's not that you're just, a horrible person, you don't believe in healthcare for all people, because I could have said that, because I was kind of feeling that. But I didn't think that was going to be productive. So I was like, okay, I'm like, tell me more, like why? You know, they're like, I don't want my taxes to increase, and Bernie said that our taxes are going to go, you know, increase, and I was like, you're right. And they got really shocked. And I was like, you're absolutely right. For middle class families, our taxes are going to go up a little bit. And I was able to say then after that, and I said, also remember that while our taxes will go up, so they got reaffirmed that there was a fact that they knew that was actually correct. I said, did you know that we're not going to have co-payments, no premiums, no out-of-pocket costs? And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah. So your taxes will go up, but if you're getting employer-based coverage, your money's already coming out of your check for that health care. Imagine if it didn't anymore. And so what if you paid a little more taxes, but at the end of the year, you're going to save a lot of money? And imagine giving everybody health care where we have preventative, so people don't have to wait till they're really, really sick, and then we have to dish out all this money for stage 2, stage 3 cancer or other terminal ill diseases. And all of a sudden, I went from a conversation of someone being against something that I truly believe in my heart to saying, you know what, you gave me something to think about. I didn't know the rest. And Jennifer said this earlier, it's about the corporate news media. It's about how people are consuming information. Who gives them that information? And the best information is going to come from, I'm telling you this, I've tried it, it's from those conversations from people who you have relationships with. The media is not our friend, and I'm not trying to sound like Donald Trump. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. But in order for us to really get these issues in the quote mainstream, the mainstream is on our street. The mainstream is in the coffee shops, the mainstream is in the schools and in our jobs and with our colleagues. So I just wanted to share with you an example of what it means to also be informed about a new social contract with details that are accessible to people. Because the other thing I'll say is we're very, again, highly intellectual. And we also use terminology that doesn't speak to people in our communities that are immigrants. English is their second language. They may not have high school diplomas. We just got to remember that we have to be talking to ordinary, everyday people. And I always tell people, you got to go where the literacy rate is, and everybody else who has 18 master's degrees, they'll learn too. You don't need to be up here.
So I'm going to throw out, because these are called lightning talks, and things are too fast, too quick, and we're running out of time, so I want to throw out 2 questions at once, so I can speak to either of them. One is, the reason we're having these conversations now is we're in an historic electoral cycle. Now, these conversations aren't about specific candidates, but they are about how do we raise the bar? What are our strategies? How do we think about pushing candidates or ensuring that people that believe that high bar candidates can win work with them? That's one question. And second, democracy requires the ballot box, but that's necessary, though not sufficient. We really need to rethink democracy in our daily lives and have a much more democratic practice, democratic culture, in our institutions, in our schools, in our communities. What does that look like for the work you're doing? What could a new social contract bring in terms of new kinds of democracy?
So how many folks in this room feel like this democracy is yours, that you own it? So this is the biggest transition we have to make in this country, is that we have to understand that people will always try to take it from us. They'll always try to steal it, but it is absolutely, unequivocally, and unapologetically ours.
That's right.
It is ours. This country is what we make it. If democracy is the civil rights movement and the women's rights movement and the movement for LGBT equality, then it is also segregation, then it is also gender oppression, then it is also the oppression of folks who are trying to live their truths. Democracy is all of that. It's ours for us to hold, for us to shape, and for us to make. And I think that there is a lot of energy spent trying to sort of remove that fact from our consciousness, because when we realize it's ours, then we understand that democracy is so much more than just voting on election day. It is about who is in our local offices. It is about the district attorney we have. It is about the mayor that we have. It is about the water and sewage and treatment plants. And that piece can be overwhelming. But I think that we're now in a position to do. This is what I understand, is that when Republicans get power, they don't get power to compromise, and they don't get power to kind of sit there and hold it. They get power to transform, right? They move an agenda. And I think that, we are in a really special time because we do have the most diverse Congress we've ever had in the history of our country. We do have the most progressives, identified progressives, than we've ever had in Congress. We have progressives running and winning at local levels and across states. And so it provides us an opportunity to dream. And I'll just end with this example. It was exciting to see the Green New Deal and Medicare for All and some of these big ideas become mainstream this year because of a lot of your work, right? You all helped make that happen. But for as a Black woman living in this country, I have to say the thing that I've been most disappointed about on the right and the left is the way that we imagine our criminal legal system, prisons, caging, and jail. While we got Medicare for All and a Green New Deal, as for criminal justice reform, we got the First Step Act. I mean, literally made the first step. I would say after years of oppression and caging of particularly Black communities, now increasingly brown communities as well, we're way past the first step, and we need a full transformation. And so, we have a plan to say criminalization, its origins are Jim Crow and slavery. It is not, any time this century, but there is one place, one marker where we know criminalization became a huge part of social policy, and that's with the passage of the 1994 crime bill. Some of you may have heard this come up in the debates. We are working right now with a diverse coalition of racial justice groups to repeal the 1994 crime bill. But our vision isn't just to replace it with some legislation that a few lawyers came up with in Washington. Instead, we have a people's process where we're asking the communities who have been most impacted by mass incarceration to tell us what real freedom and safety looks like. So we are committed to making sure that real people who have been impacted and experienced harm by the previous version of the legislation actually design the replacement legislation. That's owning your democracy. It's saying, I'm not just going to leave it up to these other people to make the decisions, but I'm going to do the hard work of dealing with how do we create policy when we are both victims of crime and we have people we love who perpetrate it. Do we create policy that just sees them as disposable or just cages them and continues to separate policies? Or we deal with the fact that harm happens, trauma happens. But for certain communities, when trauma and harm happens, they get a slap on the wrist, or maybe they get mental health treatment, right? And for other communities, they get cages, and they get separated from their families. And that benefits no one except for the capitalists who then exploit their labor in prison.
The question of what democracy actually is and looks like is absolutely much more than the ballot box, but I do want to emphasize that as in 2020, it's a pretty important tool just to make that clear. That might, if you have to choose a tool this year, that's the one I want you to choose. But I say that, building local power for me, that's why I consider myself to be a movement builder. I believe in the power of people. I never underestimate the power of the people. I tell people, get up and run. You get up and run. Don't say, who the hell am I? I'm just a public school teacher. I'm just a nurse. I'm just this. If you really feel like there needs to be change and there are people in power that are not doing the change, get the hell up and run. I mean, we had a wonderful Puerto Rican young intellectual bartender who won a race against a 10-term incumbent. People are winning across this country. And also to reorient our minds. Again, we cannot do the practical work if we're not doing the spiritual work and we're not doing the work on the inside. And I say to people all the time, for me, I'm not asking anybody for any favors. I don't think it's anyone's doing, quote, the good thing by giving us a $15 wage or giving us Medicare for all. These people work for us. That is my taxpayer dollar that pays for your salary to work on behalf of the people. And we got to start acting like we're the bosses of these people. And oftentimes when I go to town halls and stuff, I'm like, who do you think this guy is? He works for you. You're the boss. Get up and ask what you want to ask. And so we got to hold these people accountable. And what I'm hoping happens, the practice is, this is what I get worried about. I get worried about what we did when Obama went into office. I cried too. I was like, eyewitness history. Oh my God, so amazing. And then we all fell back asleep, and that's the bottom line. And I was one of the people that got marginalized by the left because I was like, look, Obama's the first black president. Great, I wish I had him as a president right now. But the quarter-in-chief, like that's just the bottom line. Like there are things that we do as progressives that when we get someone who we think that we're aligned with, or we play identity politics, and then we all go back to bed. So what I'm hoping happens in 2020 is I want to defeat fascism.
But what I hope that you also commit to in this democracy is not that you just defeat fascism, but you replace it with something else that works for all of us, which means that on January 21st of 2021, I'm going to Washington, D.C. I don't care if Bernie's the president, Elizabeth's the president, I don't care who's in the White House. I'm protesting that day. Because I want to make sure that these movements are going to be held accountable I already had an Amtrak ticket before I was an organizer for the Women's March. I was already going to be in Washington, D.C. because I didn't care if Hillary was the president. I was going to protest Hillary. I don't care who it was. So I hope that that's the kind of commitment that we are, because we have to be in this for the long haul. And that's the thing that Republicans have done. They've been for 4 decades figuring out how to take every court seat on the federal bench in the Supreme Court, while the progressives were waking up every 4 years to figure out how to vote for the lesser of two evils. And I'm not doing that anymore. And so I hope
So what she said. In all honesty, I mean, I think this conversation is exactly what Right to Democracy was hoping for and was about when we started, around a new social contract. And this notion of democracy, as Jennifer was saying, that basically we have to think about democracy in a big way. They wanted us to think of it in a small way, a very narrow way with elections. I couldn't agree with Linda more. The significance of 2020, not only on a presidential level, but on a state level, and on a local level. So everything, we don't have time. I mean, we have a 16-year-old Swedish activist organizer who's over here, Greta Thunberg, who's been basically raising up. But the time is short. We have to get this right for a new social contract. And it fundamentally comes down to democracy. Can we think big, act big together, go out, talk to people who are not in here with us yet? We can win what we have the power to win. And if we can get our communities organized, we can win quite a lot. So it's just so exciting to be up here with all of you.
All right, that's So I now want to introduce Paul Son from Now Action. Come on up. Labor Solidarity Network, right? Did we get that one? Yep. And now, I'm running behind. You'll have to forgive me. So I'll just start by introducing the theme, which is a new social contract for workers, because any new social contract worth fighting for has got to include a new social contract for workers, right? So we have all worked on this together. I want to open it up by saying, what do you think, based on all the years of work you've been doing with various worker movements and labor movements, that a new social contract for workers could work?
Sure. Thanks, Kathy, and everyone. I'm Paul Son from Help Action. Really, the impetus for this project is really the success of movements like Medicare for All and Green New Deal, and spurring progressives in our nation to think boldly about what we really need. And I think that the fight for 15 is an example of a really successful instance of our movements, thinking big for something that was thought to be radical and unwinnable. And now, just a few years later, the House, with all the New Hampshire delegation behind it, passed the Raise the Wage Act, $15 minimum wage, and a third of the country was covered by $15 minimum wages. But we really need to that's now consensus among the Democrats. So what we need is to think more structurally and boldly about what U.S. workers really need. And I think during the conversation, I don't need to tell this room how the economy isn't working for working families. Most of them are one bad break away from financial crisis. And so this project's painting out a set of bold structural ideas for reforms that we really need to reorient our economy so it works for workers.
Hi, I'm Mike Kavanaugh. I work with the Labor Network for Sustainability, working frankly to connect unions with the fight around the climate crisis. But that's after 40 years of working in the labor movement as a union organizer, as a bargainer, as an elected leader, and for the last 20 years, part of the national AFL-CIO, like the big labor bureaucracy. I had the really honor to work as the assistant to Tafari Gabre, our executive vice president, who's the first immigrant Ethiopian political refugee leader of the labor movement. In all of that time, I've found that the biggest challenge is workers, not having power, not having the ability to influence, their day-to-day lives through their intersection with work. And it's still fundamentally the biggest problem is workers' lack of power. Working now on a big visionary piece, and that's obviously what the new social contract, we're talking about having a vision of where we want to be that's so radically different from where we are right now. It's inspirational, it's aspirational, and that's really, that's what we're doing with the Labor Network for Sustainability. We're working on the Green New Deal, which is at the very same time a big, bold, ambitious, audacious vision for the future, as has been mentioned by people here before. We've got to get there. There's an urgency to being able to address this for us to have any future whatsoever. So in any case, all of this to say that the idea of the need for our world to have a new social contract, a big idea that puts democracy and equity at the core and sustainability at the core is, it sounds a little extreme, but it actually literally is life and death. And that's sort of what motivates, I would dare to say, most of us in this room. So that's my point.
One of the big ideas which Dr. Justice has been working on is this notion that we need to rethink how workers can bargain, right?
Right.
And we were talking about sectoral bargaining. I don't know if you'd like to share a little bit about that, what it means.
So, sure. I don't know. I was going to, if you want to do sectoral bargaining, we got another aspect. So I'm Adam Shaw with Jobs with Justice, and our organization is dedicated to increasing collective power and access to collective bargaining in a broad sense, and including traditional union bargaining, but we believe in a much broader sense for working people. And it's really a crucial issue, as we've been talking, and we really love the discussion you just finished last panel with about the idea that democracy, well, political democracy is very important. You can't have political democracy without economic democracy. We think about what just happened. People might have seen the news that Jeff Bezos took away health care from several thousand of his workers and fired a couple dozen other workers by closing a subsidiary of the Washington Post. And nobody really seemed to have any response to that, because nobody believes that they have the ability to negotiate with Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is the richest person in America. How do we, as an individual, negotiate with Jeff Bezos? Well, I have the power to negotiate with Jeff Bezos, but we do have the power to negotiate with Jeff Bezos, and we have to figure out our current system for exercising that power, which is going shop by shop and forming a union, is broken. It works for those who are in the system. It's very hard for those who aren't in the system to join the system. So we want to think about, if we're doing bold reforms, how do we figure out how to foster experiments in economic democracy, foster ways for people to start practicing economic democracy. The federal government gives lots of money to states and local government through all the different projects they have, including when there's a recession, unemployment, but through worker development, workforce development programs, and all these programs. What they should be doing, we have our idea. One of our big ideas is that there should always be an economic democracy component attached to that. If you we have the care sector is one that is unorganized on purpose because it was made up of people of color, women of color in particular, and it's excluded from the National Labor Relations Act. They're not allowed to organize. The Supreme Court stopped them from creatively organizing. And the care sector is totally broken because people don't have the money. The consumers of care also don't have the ability to get child care or elder care for parents when they need when they have health care issues. So what do? We don't just create a program that we do want to create a universal program that gives people access to child care and to elder care. We want to do it in a way that fosters economic democracy. We want to do it in a way that the people who are invested in the care system, the workers, the consumers, and yes, the businesses too, elect representatives to trust boards who oversee how that money is handled, make sure that low-road agencies don't get that money, make sure that workers get ways to apprenticeships and ways to go up in their economic system, that workers are paid a decent wage, and when people are voting for their own representatives to a trust board, they feel their economic democracy and therefore might be able to engage in it in other ways as well.
And now action has also been a big part of the sectoral bargaining conversation. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, our labor law system is so broken right now that, there are fewer workers in unions than there were in 1935. And there was no national labor law, and we passed the National Labor Relations Act. And so there's just so much reform we need. I mean, there's an urgent immediate package the report promotes called the PRO Act, which is to fix a whole lot of the things that don't work in our current labor law system. But then we really need to reach beyond that and for really fundamentally rethinking the way our labor law system works. And the need for sectoral bargaining is really simple. It's in our increasingly consolidated but also subcontracted economy. Many individual employers don't have the economic power to actually unilaterally improve conditions at their workplace if their competitors don't also, or if the large corporations at the top of corporate supply chains that really control their industries are not part of the solution and at the table. And our current labor law system allows only, by and large, bargaining with a direct employer. So with an individual fast food restaurant, for example, rather than across the fast food industry, or with one ride-hail company rather than across the whole ride-hail industry. We need to change that and allow, as many other countries do, collective bargaining across whole sectors and industries, up and down supply chains, and other vehicles for setting standards across sectors. And we've actually started to experiment with this in the U.S. There are places where this happens to some degree in the property services industry, where often they've gone up the supply chain, and rather than bargaining with these subcontracted fly-by-night security guard agencies, they bring big real estate to the table and negotiate with the real economic actors involved. And some states are experimenting with this. New York State established a fast food industry wage board to raise wages and conditions across the whole industry. We're seeing it with airport workers. So we need to amend the National Labor Relations Act to authorize sectoral bargaining, and then have other industry-wide standards to promote industry-wide solutions.
So the vision is basically not 100 workers, not 1,000 workers, but hundreds of thousands of workers being able to really negotiate with the power holders at the top, the ones that ultimately make the decisions, the Jeff Bezos of the world. And but there was a second piece to that report, which connects a little bit to the work you're doing, which is we also have to ensure there's some floor, right? Some decent. This is a country where they tell you that if you're not working, you don't deserve housing, you don't deserve health care, you don't deserve anything. And yet we produce unemployment every single year. It's not an accident. There aren't enough decent jobs, and the jobs that we do have are, as in the state of New Hampshire, don't allow half the families here to meet their basic needs. So how does something like guarantee a decent job, which is being called the Federal Jobs Guarantee Proposal, first put out by the Civil Rights Movement decades ago, relate to other needs and other relationships like the one between labor and the green?
Sure, thanks. The federal jobs guarantee is the basic idea, as is Medicare for all, that there should be, as a matter of right, we should take these things sort of off the table, the threat of unemployment, the threat of people not being able to provide for themselves and their families through structural unemployment, which is sort of built into our existing system, should be taken off the table, should be eliminated. It's a big idea. it's one of the big ideas that the Green New Deal has been criticized about. I mean, there's all sorts of, attacks on AOC and her colleagues when the Green New Deal was announced. This was one of the elements of it. But reality, in terms of, from a labor perspective, this is the sort of thing that we've been fighting for years, to take, the threat of unemployment off the table, to be able to have an established floor that you can bargain up front, that the competition between businesses should be not on the basis of how can you ratchet down jobs and how do you ratchet down wages, but on the creativity and the innovation of the businesses being able to compete with each other on things other than the exploitation of workers and threatening people's jobs. So there's been, as was pointed out, the idea of a jobs guarantee has been part of the discussion for years, from the civil rights movement really to the Humphrey Hawkins full employment bill. There's been various efforts over the years to establish a basic employment guarantee. This is the idea now of putting it forward in the Green New Deal, most notably now as part of the new social contract. We're trying to get this concept sort of into the public debate. We're trying to change the frame. And that's really what my take on this. All of this is about changing the frame to be able to have a conversation about things that, years ago people thought the idea of Medicare for all was, that was kind of fringe. It's not fringe. That's very mainstream. So should be the job guarantee.
So imagine we have a human right to a job at $15 an hour in fees, a union job, the federal government guarantees it to create, to answer the care crisis, clean energy, and then you have workers that are able to actually negotiate at scale, so they're not able to use a divide and conquer approach. What else do we need? How does that change things? Is there anything else?
Well, I want to say first of all that it's called a radical idea, but if you talk to anyone about what should we do about and we talk about new social contract, but to harken back to the New Deal, what should we do about when economic conditions are really bad? Lots of people will say we should have the federal, like the New Deal, we should have the federal government investing in infrastructure and finding ways to get people jobs. People believe that. Conservatives believe that. Progressives believe that. It's not a radical thing to say the federal government should be there as a backstop to make sure people have the money they need to survive. And but the real issue is how do people get the collective power? And people get the collective power from knowing they can't be fired and therefore can confront their boss. They get the collective power. You don't speak up to your boss because your boss has the ability to fire you. One of the other ideas we have in here is about just cause employment. Nobody understands.
Are you actually saying someone should have a reason for firing you?
Yeah, I've talked to people about, do you think if you go to a Trump rally, can your boss fire you? And people say no, because I have a First Amendment right. People don't understand that a boss can fire you for any reason or no reason at all. And so there's a very big reason why people aren't able to assert their collective power. And the issue is, not only when we don't have economic democracy at work, not only don't we have the money we need in our pockets, we don't have the dignity in our lives. And we have these beaten down lives where we feel like our boss is our king and our queen, and our boss has the complete control over our lives. And the ideas in these that we put forward collectively are specifically about a way to take back that dignity, take back the idea that that everybody who wants to be able to work should be able to work, and that everybody should get a decent pay for it, and that everybody should have a say in their economy, and not just, although we all agree that it's very important to vote in November, not just in that ballot box, and that if they do have that say, they will be able to practice that democracy. It might come on January 21st, 2021, because they feel they can speak up. They can feel they have the ability to speak up in their communities, in their workplaces, and in their world in general.
This is going to be our last, because these are very quick, unfortunately. How do we lift this up further? What can we all do? What can people do at the state level to keep pushing for these people?
I think we really, I mean, this election cycle is an unprecedented opportunity for pushing bold ideas. We've seen that in other areas, and but there's been really, in the debate so far, a real conspicuous silence about workers and the economy and the sort of types of bold change we need. But that said, some of the candidates are starting to talk individually about sectoral bargaining or just cause employment or the federal job guarantee. We really need to lift these issues up in this debate, and you all in New Hampshire obviously play a critical role in that. And there's a hunger nationally. A lot of these ideas are already being tested at the state and city level. They're not pie in the sky, and we really just need to make clear that the economy and workers are crucial issues that every candidate needs to address and have a bold solution for.
And I just say that look, these ideas, the aspirations that are contained within this are very important. But they're aspirations. We need to build power to get there. And we've got to build power like at the grassroots, like organizing unions, organizing workers, organizing around issues today. So I would just offer, here's one concrete and immediate step. I think people probably are aware of the fact that unions and the idea of collective action among workers is more popular now, particularly among young people, than it's been in my lifetime. I've been around for a little while. This is an opportunity where young people are looking at unions as a solution, part of the solution. There's lots of reasons for that. There's the fight for 15. There's the teacher strikes. There's the fight back against the government shutdown. There's a lot of things that have gone on and are going on, but young people are most critically concerned about the crisis of the climate. And they are in motion about that. Here in New Hampshire, around the country, around the globe, starting this week, are global climate strikes. Lots of interesting stuff happening, led by young people, to put this issue front and center for politicians of all parties, for everyone to sort of step up to the plate and recognize the crisis. I think, frankly, that's a place that we collectively need to be, is connecting with those young people that the issues here, whether it's the Green New Deal, a new social contract, all of these are big things that workers are central to. That this is crucial for the future of our planet to connect workers, unions, and young people around this fight. So I think there are there's a lot of hard work ahead of us. It does not start with the election. The election's one point along the way. I'd suggest people get active this week on these issues.
And let's not be afraid of our own shadow. Certainly the fascists weren't, and the racists weren't afraid of their own shadow when they voted for Trump. They said, we're going to do what we want to see the country we want. We should be doing what we want to do to see the country that we want. We should be able to speak up at town halls and forums with candidates. We shouldn't be afraid of saying this is radical. We should have our talking points ready to say why it's not radical if people want to shut this down, because these are very common sense ideas, and people really do want the dignity that they have in their economy. They really do they vote over and over again for things like a $15 minimum wage. They vote against union bashing laws recently. They really do understand that economic power is important to their lives, that dignity at work and in their communities is important to their lives, and we can explain it to them, and we can all go out and do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Isaac wants you to stand up and stretch for a minute.
All right, everybody stand up for a sec. I just want us to move so that our brains are nice and clear for the last of the 3 sections for this. All right, so everybody we're going to do like a quick monologue thing to get you to move, okay? So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1. You got to say it along with me. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1. Feel good? All right. That doesn't mean to go anywhere. You can sit back down now.
I want to invite Jack Schaefer, Vice of the
Yeah, Jen.
Very short conversation about how we connect all the work here in Vermont and New Hampshire, sorry, get right to Marcus, here in New Hampshire, which again has an outsized role in the electoral conversation, to these big ideas, because it all begins locally, right? So, where do you see the threads? Where do you see the connections?
My name is Viola Katsine. I'm the lead organizer of the Grand State Organizing Project. And so looking at the previous presenters what they spoke about today, I see that we're already leading some work on the ground regarding 515. Grand State Organizing Project was one of the groups that brought the 515 to New Hampshire. And we've been very persistent in holding visibilities, talking to elected officials at the State House, but also talking to workers. That's one of our big goals, making sure that we have a base of workers, because without the workers behind us and in the movement, it's really hard to do anything. We are seeing that the last legislative session, there was several bills to raise the minimum wage. One of them was what we wanted, which was to raise it to $15 by 2024. But we didn't have enough buy-in from elected officials, which is a shame. The Democrats control both chambers, the House and the Senate, but still they are very mediocre in terms of their support for that. So, and then we compromised and got in a bill for $12, but our government let us down. So how do we hold elected officials accountable? Now we continue to do that movement to make sure that wages are raised in New Hampshire, because the cost of living currently is through the roof. The housing, we have a really tight housing market now. I think for 2-bedroom apartments, and the vacancy rate is under 1%. And when you have wages that are as low as $7.25, we know that in the last 5 years, the cost of housing has gone up by 22%. How long the wages haven't gone up at all? Our minimum wage hasn't been raised since 2008. And so what are those workers doing? They have less purchasing power. And I think it's Blue Hat has always talked about the fact that if people are spending more than 30% of their income on housing, they're considered cost burden. So if someone is already paying more than 30% of their income on rent, then how are they going to cover transportation and things like Medicare or healthcare and food? So we need to make sure that housing is available in New Hampshire. We have to make sure that wages are being raised, and that's the movement that is happening across the country. We need to make that happen here in New Hampshire as well.
And RAD New Hampshire had done a survey and a report finding that the majority of people in New Hampshire, in fact, agree with the solutions they want to see, right? They wanted health care, they wanted to address housing, they wanted to address better jobs. Do you think the people of New Hampshire wanted the social contract?
Absolutely. Workers here, I know people have the reports, the business industry, the elected officials, everyone thinks that the economy is doing great, which is it's doing great, but all that prosperity hasn't reached some of the workers. So we definitely are seeing that more workers are still behind in terms of working more hours, having 2 jobs. And definitely, also the report that was a poll that was done in July that really showed that a lot of voters in New Hampshire, about 60%, want a raise in minimum wage to $12 to $15 an hour. So we are saying that there's the need, there's the urge to actually make change happen here.
Sure. My name's Jan Schaefer. I live in Warner, and like my brother Mike Kavanaugh, I also have spent many of my years in the labor movement. And I think, I look at New Hampshire, and I look at the survey that we did, and I also think about, probably many of us in this room have written letters to the editor and gone to the State House and delivered pens to the governor to get him to sign the minimum wage law. And it was vetoed. And the override is this coming week, Wednesday. I think we're probably going to see the Republicans come together on this and prevent an override of that veto. Because as somebody said earlier, the Republicans are really good at sticking together. And so, we're back to the next session, really, of when we'll revisit this again. But I do think that the more we talk to people, the more, like when I've written letters to the editor, and I'm sure other people here have had the same experience, I have people in my town come up to me and say, oh, I'm so glad you did that, right? I feel the same way. And it's surprising to me, like sometimes who does that. I think Granite State, the Granite State Organizing Project, had an amazing, you had amazing people testify. It was incredibly helpful to have people, particularly people who are in traditional low-wage jobs taking care of other people, talk about the struggles that they have and the number of jobs that they have. We have to do more. And this is long range, right? We're going to have short victory. We're going to have victories every now and then. But really, this is long term. But we can't give up on the small victories because that's what keeps us all here, and it keeps bringing more people in. So we might lose this week on the override, but we'll bring it back, and we're going to continue to have this discussion about it should be 15, it shouldn't be 12, and it should be for everybody. There shouldn't be teenagers left behind, right? That's like really bad. Disabled communities should not be left behind. And so we will just continue to bring these things forward. And as we do it, we build more power. So that is also helpful.
I'm going to share what you've been working on a little bit and how you think it relates to pushing these bigger.
So my name is Lila. I'm the co-director of 350 New Hampshire Action. We're a grassroots climate justice organization in New Hampshire, independent from the big 350.org that people may have heard of. And I've been in and around the climate movement for the past 7 years. I might be a little bit older than I look, although I did start as a teenager. And so it pains me a little bit to say that the climate movement is not strong enough on its own to address the climate crisis. We are not winning fast enough, and the climate movement, the environmental movement, we're not going to win alone. And that's because individual change and market-based solutions and the incremental change that our politicians keep pushing forward as solutions is insignificant and insufficient to address the climate crisis. We're only going to solve the climate crisis by radically reorienting the way that our government and our economy and our society works. And we're not going to do that alone. We're going to do it with organizations in the labor movement, in the movement for Black lives, in the movement for rights and democracy, and in all of the movements that we hold dear. That's the only way that we're going to solve the climate crisis and the myriad other issues that are facing people in our communities. And so I think that people in New Hampshire want a new social contract, even if they haven't put those words to it yet. I think we want a new social contract, and if we want to solve any of these issues, then we need a new social contract.
And like any other state, New Hampshire is deeply affected what happened at the federal level. 30% of the budget comes from federal transfers. The fastest growing industries are like insurance and finance, the same industries that are being propped up everywhere and actually overall harming the economy. So what do you think RAD and New Hampshire can do during this primary cycle to push this notion of reorienting? How do we raise the bar on the conversation? How do we have the 60 people here talk to 10, make it 600, and then 6,000, and then 600,000, until this is the conversation about transformation?
So for the Grand State Organizing Project, we've been, since the beginning of this year and the previous years as well, we are holding conversations around the Love 20 project, and that's what the conversations are basically organized by lay leaders, clergy in different congregations, and community leaders. And they're basically we're taking these issues to the presidential candidates and telling them that we need to divest from hate. We need to divest from things like giving more money to ICE and CTV. And really invest in our communities and invest in things that we care about we need in New Hampshire. So things like healthcare, things like education, things like clean water. It's shocking because people don't know that even in New Hampshire we have an issue with clean water. So most people don't know about that. So if we shift our priorities as a state, as a community, then I think we're able to, especially with the fact that we have this opportunity in the primary, that we can lead that conversation on the national stage. But also, I believe that in terms of having an impact, I think it starts with having relationships with people. So if you don't know people in your community, start from there. Get to know what's going on. Get to meet someone that doesn't look like you, that doesn't sound like you, someone you've never talked to. Have that courage to have a conversation with them. Know what's going on deep down. Because I think without the relationships with each other, I think it's really hard to do the movement that we need to really transform this country.
I know that 350, I know the New Hampshire Youth Movement, Rights and Democracy, American Friends Service Committee, a number of organizations in the state are bird-dogging candidates, very effectively, raising issues like this. So bird-dogging presidential candidates. So figuring out how to basically corner them and hang on to them, whether it's while doing a selfie or it's raising a question in a gathering that they might have. And I think that has been, particularly around climate, I think it's been really helpful in terms of pushing them. I think around the economy, it's been a little harder, but I do think it's really effective. And all of those organizations have worked together to do trainings and really get people to push candidates. Not just go visit them and get a selfie, but really ask them, like, where do you stand?
Yeah, thank you. So I love to go to candidate events. I think it's really fun. New Hampshire has a huge outsized role in the presidential election. If I could give it away, I probably would, but as long as we have it, let's figure out how to use it. 350 New Hampshire Action is out at events every week with our partners and the organizations you named, holding candidates accountable, pushing them to take stronger stances for climate action, and when they don't live up to our standards, we're out there calling them out. If one of you in the audience has been at an event with me or one of my coworkers that made you uncomfortable, I would invite you to lean into that and to look at the bigger picture. And you know what? If Joe Biden is at an event lying about his donations from the fossil fuel industry, you can bet that we're going to call him out, because he doesn't get to stand up there and lie to us about the role. Is having in their election. If these candidates don't come out strongly in favor of a Green New Deal, if they don't pledge to swear off fossil fuel money, if they don't pledge to keep all fossil fuels in the ground, we don't have to vote for them, and we don't have to let them stand up there and act like they're our climate champion. And I think we've been bringing this as much as we can to the local level as well. It's New Hampshire. Basically, everyone is a state rep. If you're not a state rep yourself, your neighbor is, or your friend is, or you know one, a number of elected officials who, purportedly are on our side, purportedly they, are standing for a new social contract, but in reality, if you look a little more closely, they are deeply steeped in neoliberal economics and incremental change, and they can't see past those things to the solutions that we actually need. So just a quick example, we've got Dan Feltis, really popular state senator, represents people probably in this room. Dan Feltis has endorsed a massive fracked gas pipeline infrastructure expansion through southern New Hampshire. And right now he's getting away with it. And you know what? The conflict is not between jobs and the environment. The conflict is between corporations and our communities. And right now, Dan Feltis and my Senator David Waters and Martha Fuller Clark in Portsmouth, they're siding with the corporations, and we need them to side with our communities, and it's up to us to go out there and hold them accountable.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's a last comment, because this is going to be sort of specific to what you just said. So I've been thinking about, I originally started, I started my political organizing a long time ago. One of the things I did was work very hard to try and stop the Sarsour nuclear power plant, which you might think, then I went into labor, right? Like, whoa. And I've been thinking about the new Green Deal, and I've been thinking about labor, and I think as we look at legislation in particular, to try and move forward with ideas around the new Green Deal, around what kind of energy we develop, we have to put into place real protections for workers. So real retraining, real long-term unemployment insurance, if that's what it takes. Because that gets in the way a lot, because people, some people, that's where they work, right? And they've worked there for 20 years, say at the Bow Power Plant, for example. And it's a really good job. If they could have another really good job that wasn't connected to coal, that would also be okay. But they don't, the pie in the sky idea that, someplace in the future, we're going to provide retraining. We have to bring that forward so that people understand we're not going to ask them to sacrifice everything. We're going to build it in so that that does not happen. And that's one way we'll be able to make the connections. We may want to.
I think that's actually a great place to end, because what it surfaces is that we have to move forward, build a possible future, and a new social contract that leaves no one behind. Absolutely. There's going to be a short Q&A, right?
Yeah.
And do you have the question?
Yeah.
It's more than just us, though, right?
Yes.
You want everybody on?
So I think the way we could do this is if anyone who was a speaker wants to take on a piece of it, you can stand up and address. And there's one written question that we have. We could. I think I'm gonna keep y'all on hotspot for the moment.
Oh, good.
But it doesn't mean you have to answer the question. So we just had one written, right? Two. Okay. So Sarah.
Do you want me to deliver it? Because I feel like the written form
please,
is
that'd be
easy.
great.
Hi, so I'm a member of my local planning board, and my question was about currently our town is being sued over more inclusive zoning policies that were based on density and infill and welcoming more multifamily houses. And people are suing the town over these policies, and the people who are suing are Democrats and people on the left who are worried about their street and their street having multifamily houses and all that that comes with. So personally, I'm really sick and tired of, I am going out and talking to them. I'm trying to find common ground. These are people I canvassed with during the midterms in 2016. These are people I know. What can I do? Does anybody have any ideas about how I can get further, because I just don't know how to shift this very dedicated group of slightly left-leaning people who, if it's talking about any other community, they're in there. But if they're talking about their own, they're not. So I don't know if anybody has feedback to help me with that.
I'm just gonna look around. Sure. Yeah. Let's get the one other question, and then we'll have. There was no name on it.
Hey, I'm Jennifer. I'm really glad that we're having this conversation in New Hampshire. No one's used the word purple. It's really exciting for me. People who get that, like, you know, not everyone laugh, but it's just so often that we talk about solutions in this state, and we talk about meeting in the middle, compromise. We're really purple state. I love what Jennifer said about the right never does that. And so I've just been thinking a lot, particularly in the context of the discussion about minimum wage, about how we're really being oppositional and visionary, and we're not looking for compromise, and how we're reading strategies and power analysis, and just really thinking about, like, how do we move a new social contract forward in this state in a way that's not about bipartisan strategies? Because it feels like in the circles I'm in the state, it just feels like we're always being pulled right. And also around not just minimum wage or a family-friendly economy or any of these things, but around race, around white supremacy. We have groups in this room and groups that I work with who have been told you can't use the word equity because white supremacists are coming after our organization, so then we just don't say it. So I'm just trying to figure out, we need to root our strategies in power, we have to be oppositional, we have to be visionary, and how do we do that around things like minimum wage?
So we have two related questions. How do we deal with the not in my backyard phenomenon, which cuts across many issues? And how do you deal with the purple problem? And, you know, raise the bar and really push for what we want. Do any of our many speakers want to respond?
So I'll give it a go. I really appreciate you asking that question, because we came across that during this legislative session where we were doing our analysis afterwards, after we had compromised to a $12 minimum wage, and the governor had still vetoed the 12 minimum wage because that's what Democrats thought the governor was going to sign, and unfortunately he didn't. And so we are back to square one, where we are going to be leading with our vision, which is to push for a progressive agenda, regardless of what the Democrats and Republicans say. Because I think that's what yeah, and I think the way we are planning to do this is, again, really focus on organizing workers. Because if workers are not excited about a $12 minimum wage, 11 or 10, because some of them are already making $9 an hour, then we're not going anywhere. So how do we focus on an agenda that's going to energize the workers that will benefit most? And I think the other question about race, I think and I shouldn't just say race in particular, but we just have to put together a winning narrative that really explicitly names race in everything, because I think if we're shying away from that, I know in New Hampshire we're very good at that, because it's a very white state, and so people don't want to talk about race because we have a very small percentage of minorities. But hey, let's not forget about the history of New Hampshire itself in slavery and participating in that, and the workers were brought here, but also the fact that we can't really move forward unless we start talking about that and really acknowledging what happened here. So I think explicitly naming race and racism and white supremacy in the work that we're doing, I think is going to help us move us forward, because if we're not shying away, then that means we're making a step forward.
Yes.
One interesting positive experience around the $15 minimum wage and centering race was the experience in Congress this session, where they, the very fractured moderates and progressives kind of were brought together and passed the $15 minimum wage, Raise the Wage Act. And in part, the kind of lobbying campaign actually really focused on if you watered down or carved out tipped workers or young workers, you're really leaving workers of color, especially, in the low minimum wage states behind. And in some ways, actually, that proved, happily proved to be a more unifying message than the economic message for moderate Democrats. That kind of helped shift many of the moderate Democrats to get on board. And actually, it may be different. I don't know if that was the case with Pappas and Custer. They ultimately came on board through some of the work of, I think, Brad and Granite State and others. And I don't know if there's a lesson there, because the rest of your legislature obviously is not there on 15, and actually Hassan and Shaheen are still not on board. But overall, that experience was very positive, and focusing on the racial impact, watering down the wage, and leaving workers behind, it proved to be a very powerful message with moderate Democrats.
So the other thing I would add about, so this issue around, the issue around New Hampshire being not a state with a lot of minorities. One, that's changing, right? Maybe slowly, but it is changing. But second, I think it goes to how I have been trying to think about the new social contract, which is, these are campaigns. They're long-term, right? So you think about the campaign in New Hampshire for Martin Luther King Day, which was really long, really long, and distressing, right? To some of the things that happened during that time of bringing it to the legislature year after year after year, the things that were said. But it also built within the state a really strong coalition around that issue. There are Martin Luther King Day events all across the state, and it's because, in some ways, it took so long to get it. Everybody, it's sort of bringing people on, right, year by year by year. And I think it has led to some of the Black history work that's starting to happen now, and the Black History Trail in the state. And my town is very small. We are now joined with the people in Portsmouth to talk about Black history in this little town. So when you think of something that's really aspirational, like the way the new social contract is, what comes in to make it happen is you're building a movement and you're building power, and change happens in surprising ways. This is what I would say.
So I just want to say, it goes to the question of why we need a new social contract. The race issue, Kathy mentioned it, and a couple other people mentioned it as well. The old social contract was very specifically written with white people in mind, and we're never going to be able to deal with systemic racism that may be involved. I don't know your community, so in the NIMBY, not in my backyard. And I would assume that maybe part of what you were saying is that people of color may be involved in multifamily houses. If we don't have a social contract that is inclusive, and although we did a lot of great work and I'm very in awe of the people who organized in the 30s, 40s, and 50s to create, under the old social contract, if we have a social contract that is inclusive, we're never going to be able to deal with systemic racism. And that's part of why we really want this bold idea of we really need to transform our movement rather than, the PRO Act, which is the labor movement's idea of how to fix the current labor law, is a very good idea. Why it needs to sort of rethought and we need a whole new paradigm for how working people exercise their power in a way that is inclusive rather than exclusive. And it's why we did things like focus our part of the report on the care sector, which is a very heavily female and people of color working sector of our economy. And that it's not something that's going to change right away. Your lawsuit isn't probably going to be, it isn't going to go away by pushing the new social contract for workers by itself. But it's something that is a movement that is a necessary component to dealing with structural racism.
And let's not forget that in 2016 our opposition named race, and we did not. And then they own the narrative.
So Lila, and then close, maybe?
So Sarah, I wish I had a really direct response to your qualm. I've got nothing. One thing that I think relates to that issue of how do we bring people over to our side, this big question, how do we bring people onto our side for a specific campaign, how do we bring people onto our side for a new social contract, something big or small. One thing that I see in the climate movement do really, really effectively is to help people make one really easy choice by intentionally polarizing an issue. So giving people the choice, do you stand with the millions of people, teachers, nurses, school children who will be impacted by the climate crisis, or do you stand with the CEO of ExxonMobil and Shell? When that is your choice, it is very, very easy to bring everyone over onto one side, and that's the side of the people, and that's the side that's going to win a new social contract. So, it might not have an impact on a lawsuit that is, already playing out, but I think framing and the framing of our issues cannot be underestimated. So, framing a future campaign in Peterborough, framing a future campaign in Peterborough around, just housing for all, and do you stand with the people who want just housing for all, including you and your neighbors, or you stand with the 1% of, the corporate landlords who live out of state and stand to benefit hugely financially from the opposition winning. That's just something we use, and something I've seen RAD and the Hampshire Youth Movement use incredibly effectively, and could be something to think about for local issues as well.
Thank you all. We did start a little late, so we can go a few more minutes. And we do have another story. Someone was going to share their story with you. We didn't get here on time. So I'll just close out this section by saying fascism depends on us not being able to imagine a different future. It does, because we cannot go somewhere that we have not already seen in our minds. So to talk about what we want, to talk about it, as Linda said, like we deserve it, is an act of resistance. We need to repeal and replace fascism. And I'll just leave you with this visual in mind, because what happens next is really up to us.
Thank you.
So could Adam from the Granite State Organizing Project come up?
Thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Adam Akaina. I live in Nashua. For a couple of 6 years now. Since I came to this country, that is where I live. And I want to share some little history about my life since that I'm living in Nashua. Since I was studying in community college, I was alone, and then I tried to find a job which can be able to accommodate, like to pay my bill, my rent, and so on. And the money that I'm getting paid, like $8 to $9. So that is not enough. I'm struggling. I'm working like a full-time, and as well I'm studying. And at the end of my studies, I decided to look for something which will be I can be able to cover all my bills, but I couldn't able to get a job which can pay me even $12. So I was running in the online, and at the end of the day, I find a job in Massachusetts, which is paying me $16. And working on for 1, 2 years, 3 years. After 2 years, I get a raise, $2 raise.